We're very fortunate this evening to have for our final session, Wanted, Informed, Engaged Citizens, Elections and Other Civic Engagement Opportunities. And we had initially 3 panelists lined up. Unfortunately, Stephen Caruso, who is the Capitol reporter for Spotlight, notified me a couple days ago he had COVID. So we said, no, we really don't need you, thank you. We were very sorry he couldn't join us because he was going to give us some input on some of the statewide elections and some of the issues with how the different counties in the Commonwealth handle election procedures. But being that there's so many things we can talk about, we'll miss having him here, but we have 2 great panelists for you this evening. Bethany Salzarulo, who is the director of the Bureau of Elections for Cumberland County. And she is going to be speaking to us about her job, what the Bureau of Elections does, how can you feel safe, secure, confident in voting in this county, and then we'll also be happy to take questions from you on any of the issues related to elections, and in particular the upcoming May elections. And we're going to also be then not only talking about elections and some issues of the mechanics there, we're also going to be talking about other ways in which individuals can be engaged as citizens. And one good example, one example where there's a lot of interest right now are school boards. And Paula Bussard, who's now is it president of the Carlisle School Board, and she is going to talk about what that kind of volunteering is, that sort of civil commitment is. And she'll also share with you the way that parents and other citizens in the community can work with their school boards. So I think we have a lot to talk about this evening. Before I actually turn it over to Bethany, I want to just a couple of little housekeeping things. You're going to get cards passed around. If you have questions, you can write them down on the cards. And Kate, who's in the green shirt here, will kind of be wandering, and you can hand those to her, and we'll give them to our 2 panelists to respond to those. That doesn't mean you absolutely can't, if something's burning and you just have to raise your hand at some point, you may do that, but it's easier sort of to sort things out if we have them in writing, so we appreciate that. The other thing before we get started is that Fair Districts has set up a table at the back of the room on their Fix Harrisburg initiative, and I guess also on Fair District's bigger.
I don't have anything specific on redistricting.
Okay, but it's mainly Fix Harrisburg.
But if anybody has any questions.
And this is a great example of civic engagement, trying to make your government work better for you and for other people in the community. So those of you who want to find out more on the way out, please visit their table.
And there's water in the back.
Say what?
There's water in the back.
Yes. That was the other housekeeping thing. Thank you. No, I'm glad you reminded me because my mind wanders. The other thing is of course, tonight it's a lot warmer, but even on the prior 2 nights, it got pretty hot in here. I know people were sort of uncomfortable. So we do want you to know there is water in bottles back there, and so if you find like you're parched, please take a bottle of water.
And AAUW membership forms are in the back as well.
Oh, I did not know that. AAUW, yes, we're here on behalf of AAUW. If you haven't figured that out so far, we're the sponsor for the program. And we are interested in anyone joining us who also is interested in improving the lives of women and girls, not only in our community, but worldwide. So that is our mission. And in addition to that, working on issues like elections, voter registration is another one of our important areas of interest. Okay. Kate, did I forget anything else, or am I allowed to go on? Okay, all right. So without further ado, Bethany, if you would go ahead and give us some background on the Bureau of Elections and what you do and what the challenges have been on the job and how you've seen it kind of change over the years. We have a microphone. I hope that's helping some in the back. If they get tired, they may put it down on the table, but if you have, just raise your hand if you're having a problem hearing.
I also like to talk with my hands, so having to hold this might be a little difficult. Yeah, watch out. I'll do my best. Okay, so anyway, I'm Bethany Salzarulo. I'm the Director of Elections for Cumberland County. Just kind of a brief background on me. I started at the county in 2004 as a temp, and in 2016 I became the director, lucky me, and that's where I have been. So it's been about 18, 19 years, and I do really enjoy what I do, and no matter how hard it gets, because it does. And I have a great staff. I don't know if any of you have ever been into my office for anything, but they're usually very friendly. I think they're always friendly, smiling, and really helpful. So we really work hard on that because we know that sometimes people coming in our office have issues that make them kind of grumpy. So we like to give them a smile if we can. So just a few things about what we do. Some people think that elections are once a year, once every 4 years. Some people know they're twice a year. Some people know there's a primary and a general election every year. Some don't. But everyone wants to know, what do we do when it's not election time? That's kind of the question we get quite a bit. The answer is a lot. So as you can imagine, with over 180,000 registered voters in Cumberland County, everybody's constantly moving in and out of the county, changing their party, changing their name, updating their address. There are hundreds and hundreds a day we get of changes and updates and things like that. So that's a big part of what we do in the off season, we'll call it. We handle, cleaning up the voter rolls, just all sorts of things to kind of keep everything up to date and accurate. And then of course, a year like this, a municipal year, we also deal with the candidates. They turn in their petitions in our office. We have to keep track of who turned in what for what office and what offices are on the ballot. And it's a very complex year, these municipal years. So we're pretty much busy all the time. Every once in a while, we have a little slow period, maybe in the summer a little bit, and sometimes around the holidays, which is nice, but otherwise we're pretty much hopping all the time. But during election season, we are very busy, working all sorts of hours. And the biggest things we do during election time is prepare a ballot. We proof that thing to death because obviously we can't spell anything wrong or get anything wrong. So we spend hours and days doing that. We program all of our voting machines ourselves. It's my personal staff that does it. We don't have vendors that do it. We don't send it out to get it done. We do everything in-house, and I have an amazing staff and an amazing tech that handles all the voting machine stuff and all the programming, so we do that. We train our poll workers, which I know some of you are in here. Raise your hand if you've ever been a poll worker, because I recognize a lot of you. Yes, okay. So, as you all know, you have to come to training. We have a voting machine training, and then we also have an election school, which is for the judges and inspectors of election. They aren't put you in jail judges, but the title is Judge of Election, okay? And they have to have a special training. So we do that, take a lot of time with that. But like we were speaking, this is a municipal year, okay? So this is the year that we have the lowest turnout, but in my opinion, it's the most important. And people don't realize that. Everyone worries about once every 4 years, maybe every 2 years if you're lucky, but people don't realize how much these municipal years touch their wallets and their lives. This is a huge year, and it's kind of sad to see the turnout the way it is, So for this particular year, for those of you who don't know this yet, we'll be electing Supreme Court, Superior Court, Commonwealth Court judges, and those are all statewide. And then our county commissioners are on the ballot, district attorney, our treasurer, And of course, school board, which is a big one. This year especially. It usually always is kind of a hot race, but it seems to be a little more this year. And then your township and borough offices. So borough council, for example, for Carlisle. There's township supervisors, that sort of thing. So like I said, these are the people that are making decisions about your roads, your taxes, you know, you name it. All the fun stuff we all like to talk about and deal with, right? But I myself report to a board of elections. Okay, so I'm run by a board of elections, and that is 3 out of 4 years of an election cycle, the county commissioners. So they are the board of elections. However, when they're on the ballot, as they are this year, they appoint people to take their place on the board, because as you can imagine, it doesn't make sense that they're the board of elections when they're on the ballot. That's a little not, you know, that wouldn't work out too well. So I do report to a board, and I'm very lucky that both boards of elections, so my newly appointed board that I have right now and the prior board, the commissioners that are current commissioners, were very supportive of myself, my office, the decisions we wanted to make, the things we wanted to do. I'm very lucky in that regard that they trust me and they appreciate my opinion and they want to hear what I feel is best for the office, because I'm the one and my staff were on the front lines. There are many, many election directors that are not as fortunate as I am. In fact, in 2020, Pennsylvania lost 35% of their election directors. Okay, and that's why, because they did not have, you know, we were getting beat up in 2020. To be honest, we're still getting beat up now. And to have a board that is supportive of you and backs you up is huge. I can't imagine what that would be like if you didn't have that. And I think, well, I know that that's why a lot of my fellow election directors left, because it was just a really difficult time and they weren't getting the support they needed. So that's a lot of knowledge that kind of went out the door, because most of these election directors had been there much longer than I have been. You know, 18 years seems like a long time. They were there 30 plus, some of them, and wouldn't have retired but decided to. So I'm very, very fortunate for sure. And then also I just wanted to touch on what I like to call the perfect storm, which was 2020. We had brand new voting machines, a presidential primary. We had changes to the election law for the first time in 80 years. And we had COVID. So I call that year the perfect storm. And we weathered that storm and were super successful and things went really, really well. But it was hard. It was hard for everybody. It was hard for us. We went from, you know, only having absentee ballots, which maybe we had 2,000-3,000 of those in election, to having mail-in ballots as well as absentee. So we went from that to 60,000 ballots, you know, absentee and mail-in ballots. So I upped my staff. There's now 10 of us. There used to be 6. We have more space. I keep taking over more and more of our building. My facilities is super happy about that. You know, it was quite the year, but we survived. So just to touch on, as I know one of the things we want to talk about was how ballots are counted, you know, elections, safety and security. So a couple of things that I'm going to kind of walk through, although some of you poll workers in here will know this process well. On election day, how many of you vote in person? Few of you, so you've used the new voting machines? Okay, do you like them?
Yes.
Yes, good. I usually get that. I don't get a lot of complaints about them. I think they're very easy to use. They're very clear. They have the nice paper trail, all those good things. So on election day, when you go to vote, you vote your ballot, you look at the paper printout, you confirm everything, you hit cast your vote, okay? At the end of the night, the judge of election brings those results back to our office. So the polling place results are done that way, and they come back, we read them into our system, and then those are your election day votes. For mail-in and absentee ballots, how many of you have voted by mail or absentee? Whoa, okay. People love that. They love voting by mail. So as you all know, you have to fill out an application to be able to get that ballot, right? Name, address, date of birth, where you want the ballot mailed, last 4 of your social, driver's license number, sign it, date it, right? There's a lot of information on that. And so one thing that I think there's a misconception is that we just willy-nilly mail ballots, okay? We can't do that. We have to have one of those applications that you've all pretty much filled out here, to be able to process that to issue you a ballot. And we confirm all of that information with what's in our voter registration system. Okay, so we know, we look at your signature, we look at your date of birth, we look at the last four of your social, we look at all that good stuff. And that's how we process your application and we mail you a ballot. Okay, so the ballot goes out to the voter, you get that ballot, you vote it, you hopefully fill in the ovals correctly and don't put check marks or smiley faces or dashes or all the things that I find because people don't know how to fill in ovals. You put it in a secrecy envelope, right? You put it in the other envelope, you sign it, you date it, don't get me started on that. And then you either mail it back or who's come to our office to drop them off? Oh my gosh, no one mails it, okay. And when you come in to drop it off in the ballot box, what happens? Anyone remember what happened when you?
They greet you with a smile.
Yeah.
I think most times, oh, go ahead.
No.
I think most times I've come in, there's been either a county policeman, local policeman, and very helpful because he always says, and do you have a secrecy envelope? Have you signed it? As a reminder, yes, as a reminder, so that's great.
Yes, so we use one of the sheriff's deputies from the county, and they're there, and that's what they do. They ask you if you did all those really important steps, because if you didn't, your ballot might not count. So we try to get it on the front end rather than deal with it, later. So we ask all those good questions. So what happens is you drop that off, okay? Then that night we record it in our system. And then if you have an email in our system, you get an email that says your ballot's been returned, yay. And then all that good stuff. We put them in a secure location in precinct order and they stay in that secure location until election day, because we are not allowed to do anything with those ballots until election day at 7 a.m. Okay, so what would be really nice is if we could get the state legislature to move that date so we could canvass a little bit sooner. It would get things done faster, but for now it's 7 a.m. on election day. So 7 a.m. on election day, I have a canvassing team set up. They're made up of only county employees. We do not use temporary staff. We do not hire from the outside. We don't grab Joe Smith from the driveway. Like they're only county employees, okay? They're all sworn in. They will take those ballots by precinct. They will confirm that what is in that bin. So all your envelopes that you signed would put your date on, and we compare it to the list that's in our system, make sure we have all the ballots, and then we open them, okay? And why you have the secrecy envelope is this. We open up the first envelope, the one that you signed and dated. I gotta use my hands. We take the secrecy envelope and we separate it from that identifying envelope, okay? Then we have a big old stack of secrecy envelopes. So now I can't see how Paula voted, okay? Then we open up the secrecy envelopes, we get them all prepped and ready, and they're run through what's called it's a 850 scanner, but it's a scanner kind of like, I don't know, your kids probably had in school when they had to do PSSAs or whatever. And that scanner will count your ballots, okay? And then on election night, when we're all done, hopefully we get done before, 3, 4 in the morning, we will post those results on the website. And that's what you see. You'll see an election day total, and then you see a mail total, okay? So then after the election, when all's said and done and we're all set, we do what's called a risk limiting audit that we do through the state, where we count a specific number of ballots and votes and offices and all of those things to confirm that everything's accurate. And then we are also mandated by the election code to do a 2% audit. So we take 2% of the votes cast and we audit those to make sure that what our system said is what we have what we have in our hands, okay? And then we also do plenty of testing of the machines in the system leading up to the election. Okay, in fact, we have a public test that people can come watch. It's really exciting, let me tell you. Okay, but that's sort of the process of kind of birth to death of all of those different ways of voting. What we do is accurate and safe and secure, and we test it and then check it and audit it and it's just what we do. It's what we're required to do by law, and it's what we do. So I think that's kind of all I have, other than to tell you that this job, when I started 18 years ago, is not the same job as it is now. I will say 2020 changed a lot of things for everybody. It's certainly changed how people view our office. You know, it used to be people would call us because they were mad that they lost, but they weren't mad at us that they lost. Now people are just mad at us. So that's a little different. It makes the job a little more difficult. We deal with kind of some difficult subjects and people having very strong opinions one way or another about the process and what we do. It makes it a little more difficult. It makes us feel a little beat up some days, you know, but we do our best, and we still all really, really love our jobs. And this primary will be my 35th election. And that makes me feel like really tired, but it'll be my 35th election. And every time on election night, after we count all the votes, everything's done, everybody goes home, and it's just me and my main staff. So there's maybe 4 of us left, and it's, you know, could be midnight, it could be 2 in the morning, whatever time it is. When I go through and turn off all those lights, I'm so proud of what we do. So proud of it. So they've been taking that from me. But
I love that.
Does anyone have any questions on the, okay, but if any not written out you want to ask, okay? Is that what you're saying? You want to verbally ask? What do we got? And I'll hand you the microphone if you want to ask the question. Why don't I do that? We'll just start here.
We'll take them either way.
Couple. One is sometimes I sign with my middle initial and sometimes I don't. Does it matter?
no, because we have your date of birth, your identifying information. It makes no difference. So you sign how you normally sign. That's not a problem.
Okay, the other one is, where does ballot carrying stand with locally and the state?
So curing. So just for those who do you all know what ballot curing is?
Go ahead and define it.
Okay, I'll define it. Okay, so ballot curing is once you've turned in your ballot, okay, then you call me and say, I didn't put the date on it. So that would be me going to that secure area after your ballot's been turned in, taking out that ballot and letting you come in my office and fix it, okay? Or me calling you and saying, hey, you didn't sign this, we can't take it, those sorts of things. So Cumberland County, so right now where it is in the courts and everything is sort of convoluted. So it's kind of all over the place. We've gotten all sorts of different guidance and direction, and one court says this and then they appeal it and then another court says. So Cumberland County has never had curing procedures that are written down that are anything we ever, did or didn't do. It was more like, oh, look, we have a few people who didn't sign their ballots. Let's give them a call and see if they can come in. Now, if their ballot came from Florida because they're snowbirds, well, they can't come in and sign it and there's nothing I can do. So that was always what we did. We didn't have anything set in stone, but we would always try to get voters to come in and do whatever needed to be done with the ballot. Well, once mail-in ballots started, we started the process of before you turn in your ballot, we're gonna ask you all those really important questions, because that's not curing. Because curing is after it's been turned in and officially documented that it's been returned, okay? Because we have no procedures in place, the court said we can't do it. So there's nothing I can do right now for curing. That's why we try to get to people on the front end before you turn in your ballot. And I will tell you, this last time we were ordered by the court to separate anybody who did not separate ballots of anyone who did not put their dates on their ballot. We had over 30,000 mail ballots returned. We only had 100 ballots without dates. So you all are really smart and read your directions, and we are really good at asking the question because there were counties with thousands that didn't have a date and they would not count. So that's kind of where we are in that.
Let me, before we go on with it, because someone gave me a card here. How do third-party candidates for local office get on the ballot?
So they will file what's called nomination papers. Instead of nomination petitions like what Paula does, they're nomination papers. And so they will only go on the ballot in November. They won't be on the primary. And they will have to get a percentage of votes, it's 2.5%, of the votes cast in the last general election for their district. So if they're running for Carlisle School District, they would have to get 2% of the highest vote cast in the previous November election. That's how many signatures they would need to get. and they can get signatures from anyone of any party, because it's a November, they're gonna be on the November ballot, and obviously, regardless of party, everyone gets to vote in November, okay? So it can be anywhere from 12 or 13 signatures to, if you're looking at a bigger office, a couple thousand, just depends.
Why don't you ask?
I take it that you capture a hard copy of all votes, is that correct?
Yes, so the machines have the paper that prints out, and then we
Okay.
have the actual
Okay.
paper ballots that you fill
Then
out.
what constitutes grounds for disputing an election?
Disputing an election?
Yeah, if somebody wasn't happy about losing
Mm-hmm,
and they say, well, I think I won,
mm-hmm.
what do they do? And what constitutes something that would make you react to that request?
So that would come from a court. So they would have to, there's a, what they call it, like a challenge period. After the election, it's 5 days after we put the result books on display. And then they would have to file a petition in court stating why they feel that way, what their reasoning is and all of that. And then we would be ordered, my office, to do a recount.
Okay. And that's the local court, the county
Right, that would be
court?
the
Court of Common
Yep,
Pleas?
Yes, thank you, yes.
Okay, now is there, I'll just following up
Yeah.
on that. Is there a standard that you have to respond, but in terms of directing you to do something, do they have the burden to show?
Yes.
You know, that in fact something was done incorrectly, which would be
Yes.
typical in any legal proceeding, that the plaintiff would have the burden to show that in fact it wasn't just my imagination there, this is why I believe, yeah.
Yes,
this
they
is-
have to.
Okay.
Mhm. Yes.
Other questions?
Yeah.
I don't need it. I have a loud voice. I'm fine.
Okay.
So the machines were new in 2020. What do we expect to be the life? What's the expectation of the life of that machine?
So from the vendor, 18 to 20 years.
Okay.
Now we've never, I have only been here through, well, when I started, we had all paper. Then we went to the Ivotronic, we had those for 13 years. And now we've gone to this. So one thing the state's doing this time, which is extremely helpful for us. So when we had the Ivotronic machines, which were great, and I love those too, the state wasn't certifying updates to them after a while. So it kind of, I will say it was kind of a push for everybody to get new machines, because then there was a mandate that we had to get new machines. So what they're doing now is we're getting certified upgrades and, you know, all those good things. So that's really gonna help also extend the life of these as well for us to use them longer, I think. So, yeah.
Okay. This question has come up a couple of times among poll workers.
Yeah.
Especially during the presidential elections.
Okay.
When I'm in precinct of 4-2, and so at that point in time, a couple of years ago, they had divided Dickinson campus,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so that if you lived in this area, you voted at that precinct, and they were all over the place. I think now they're all combined, if I'm not mistaken, into
vote
one
here.
precinct. Right, which is great for
Yeah.
them and everything. But, so our question was, is there a national registry so that if you are a student, you can't vote where you are presently going to school and file an absentee ballot in your home precinct? So is there a registry that, and I'm just using students only because that was the easiest thing of someone who would be voting, could be voting in two places. Okay. So is there a registry, and does Pennsylvania belong to that registry?
So if anyone tried to do that within the state of Pennsylvania, yes, we're all connected, okay? If someone did that, let's say in Ohio, they lived in Ohio, they registered here, they voted absentee from Ohio, we do not currently have every state on a system. We are part of the system of, I'm gonna say more, it'd be like a national voter database. It's called ERIC. It stands for, don't ask me what it stands for, election registry, something, I don't remember. But so that is finally starting to take shape and really get on board. There are some states that aren't, but the majority are, so it's really coming along. So I'm excited about that finally we've got something a little more solid.
Okay.
I will tell you though, those college students have a hard enough time filling out their registration
Oh, I
form, so
know.
I don't think they're doing both.
I know. And then my last question and again, is because of the college students.
Yes.
I have seen, okay, so I've been a poll worker since before your predecessor's predecessor. Okay,
Yes.
that's how long. And
I know it's been a while.
it is amazing to me how many now are registered independent versus when I started. Okay, so the majority of people that came in belonged to a party. We had very, very few people who were registered independents. And of course, we were always explaining to them, no, you can't vote in the primary because, it has to be, but if there is an issue, you can, okay. Now, it is just tremendous. And so, what is the number of, I want to say, not necessarily parties, but designations for independent? Because all those initials, have you noticed, they're all different.
There are, it's like 150 registered parties and counting in Pennsylvania. If you look, when you get your white box on election day, there's a street list in there. If you flip to the front of the street list, it gives you the codes for all the parties, and it just keeps growing. So, and all you need at the state is like 3 people who want to be the Bethany party. That'd be really fun. And, call the state and get it to be a registered party. So we have the Halloween party, the birthday party, the Jedi party, you name it. So, but none of them can vote in the primary unless there's a question or a referendum on the ballot. So,
Right.
yeah.
Now, do you know, is it that way in all states?
I don't know. I don't know that. I'm not sure.
Well, it probably varies because some states have open primaries, so it doesn't
Right.
matter.
Right.
It's much more of an issue in Pennsylvania.
This isn't a question, but it has to do with the different, so
I-
legislation,
Hang on.
Oh.
Hang on. I know.
as somebody who I keep tabs on the legislature, so. But the bills, that have been in front of the State House, over the past session, state, and that have support from a lot of independent, a lot of groups who are supporting open primaries, has a part in it that says if you are affiliated with any other party, you don't qualify to vote in a primary. That you have to be an independent, not affiliated with any of these other parties.
Oh, does it really? Oh, boy.
That sounds like an education issue, that although they might think they're really clever in coming up with the Jedi party
Right.
and whatever party, they're disenfranchising themselves.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I don't need the mic.
Are you sure? I can't hear you.
I'm sure. Has participation increased, and if it has, by what estimate would you make since
Participation in voting?
on the off-year elections, since mail-ins have become available widely?
Yes. So that has increased the percentage of turnout for a municipal year. Now, of course, I only have 2021 to compare it to right now. But yes, because for those of you who maybe vote mail exclusively, there is the annual mail-in ballot application. So we mail it to you every February, and when you fill it out, it's good for the primary and the general. It's good for 2, okay? Because of that, every single February, we're gonna mail you that application. So people who didn't even know there was an election in 2021 were like, oh my goodness, well, let me fill this out and vote. Now, I would say the increase was somewhere like, I want to say 10 to 12%-ish. So it wasn't huge, but it was something. And I will say the majority of those mail-in applications are Democratic voters. So I think it gave some of the Republican candidates who usually feel that they don't have as much competition sort of a little startle, because it is different. The ratio in parties is so different. So, but yes, it has increased turnout. Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah, first off, Bethany, thanks for everything you do. I've contacted your office and all this, it's been very, very helpful.
Thank you.
You mentioned that your job has become more difficult recently. Any thoughts on why that is and what could be done to kind of move things back to the way they were or turn things around?
So I think it's the distrust that is out there for election officials and the voting machines and the process. It's never been the way it is now. And it's a national thing. I mean, we have groups coming to our Board of Elections meetings that I don't even think they live in Cumberland County, but they're part of these national groups. And they're just sowing all sorts of discontent and just people, it makes people uncomfortable, and they pull out data and say things that aren't accurate, and I can speak till I'm blue in the face about why it's inaccurate and show the proof and all the things, but once those words are out, it's really hard to take them back. And it's difficult. It's really difficult. I encourage you, I tell everybody this, watch one of our Board of Elections meetings that are streamed. You can go back and see previous ones. You'll understand, and I don't know how to turn it around. I do my best. I never used to come to things like this, but I do now because I want the right information out there. I will talk to people. If you have questions, I'll talk to you on the phone for 25, 30 minutes if you want me to explain the process, because I want the right information out there. And that's the only way I really know to do it. We're very transparent. We put things on our website. We show things. We have people can come in and watch the canvas on election day of the mail-in and absentee ballots. And if anyone has ever done that, I stand there with them. I answer their questions. I try to squash all the conspiracy theories. It's just rough. So I'm doing my best. I just don't really know how to. I don't know how to do it, but
start doing some commercials.
I know, right? Maybe I should.
Well, Bethany, our last session talked a lot about misinformation, disinformation, fake news, and you're just one little component of the whole big industry of creating false narratives. So, but you have to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. If there are no other questions, I just have one final one for Bethany before we move on to talking about school boards. What could the legislature do? You've already talked about being able to canvass earlier. What could the legislature do to make your jobs not so much easier, but more efficient, more defensible, or maybe easier too?
The biggest thing is being able to pre-canvass sooner. For us, that's a big one. We really don't have a wish list, which is kind of strange, but I think we're so used to, this is the election code, this is what we follow, this is how we do our jobs. But once Act 77 came out, which allowed for mail-in ballots and many other things, but that's obviously was the big thing. For us, it was the rush to get the answer. So everybody wanted faster results, but they don't understand that paper ballots take longer. So, so only allowing us to be able to start that morning was difficult because we were running parallel elections. I had an in-person election I was running and a mail ballot election I was running. So us being able to start, what?
Why?
Because we have to.
Oh, I know that,
Yeah,
but why do you have to?
Because the legislature.
I know that, but what's the logic that the legislature?
Well, you're not going to ask her to explain the General Assembly. I don't know that any of us are up to that.
Don't they have to have some rationale?
No. They can pass a law.
No, the short answer is no.
That's not fair.
Short answer is no.
Because they don't do the job. I mean, it's like everything else, right? They're not in the trenches. They're not my poll workers. They're not doing the job. So they don't understand how complex that made everything to run two separate elections in one day. So anyway, but I don't.
Okay.
So there, other than that, the pre-canvassing is the main issue.
Yeah.
Okay. One more.
I'd like better clarification on curing and date stuff.
Sure. Any of those court cases that we're dealing with, like the dated ballots, the undated ballots, the curing, all those things, if they could ever make a decision on those things, that would be great, because I feel like we're constantly preparing for the worst case scenario of whatever. I mean,
So legislation that would address that, so everything didn't have to go through the courts to resolve it.
Yes.
If there was legislation giving a procedure for curing, that's what.
but it took them 80 years to make any changes to the election code, so I'm not super
Holding your breath.
Can I just ask one question?
Okay.
One more
This is
question?
the really, really late.
Just the last one. just as you were talking about like the timing, and you see like on TV, they'll start putting percentages. Is there certain times where you have to report to the news, like this is how the ballots are coming in?
So what we do election night is as the precincts are coming back, so as the judges are coming back, we will continually update our website like every 15 minutes, and it'll say, you know, this many precincts are in, this many precincts are in. I think the news pulls from that. We don't contact them directly. The only time we do is at the end of the night, we put out a press release that says all results are in. But they do exit polling and different things like that that gets them their answer sooner, I guess.
So those numbers aren't coming from an election board that we're seeing on TV, or?
I'm not sure. I don't know if they go to our website and put the number. I don't know. But
They must.
we don't begin until after 8 o'clock. So if you see anything before then, that's definitely exit polling or something like that. So.
Okay, we're gonna pivot at this point. Thank you very much. As I introduced Paula earlier as the president of the Carlisle Area School Board, I asked her if I could read to you what the mission statement is of the school board, and ask her to sort of just comment on that and how she feels. This is one that's been adopted by the school board. The Carlisle Area School District is committed to providing all students with educational and leadership opportunities to meet the challenge of personal responsibility, enabling them, to become contributing members of our diverse society. The district will excel in student achievement, community engagement, and financial stewardship. So, and maybe that's just sort of the jumping off point. If those sound like your areas of responsibility, how do you view, how do you implement this vision for the district?
Well, in fact, the school board doesn't implement the mission, the administration does.
Okay.
We set the vision, which is empowering every learner, and then out of that is that mission, which, thinking about it, is pretty plain English. All students first, all of them. Education and the ability for them to be productive citizens. And we believe the best way to do that is to focus on their achievement, engaging the community, and being as financially responsible as possible. And so that, the mission is actually carried out by the administration. And that kind of gets to a good point, because I find, and I'll cover it in a bit, that a lot of people don't understand what governing is. But I kind of wanted to jump off from, Bethany highlighted, you know, the many local levels that individuals can run for office. And school board's only one. Borough council, township supervisor, judge of election, inspector of election.
Please.
And so, you know, auditors, tax collectors, so many more. But there are also volunteer opportunities at borough councils, townships, and school boards. You know, borough councils, park and recreation, planning commissions. I'll get to school boards volunteer in a minute. But I always like you know, what are your civic engagement opportunities? Running for local office is probably one of the most important ones. And a lot of times people don't know how to really think about that. And so I always say 3 things you ought to do. Attend the meetings or view them now. A lot of us live stream, so you don't even have to leave your home. Look at their agendas. Look at the materials associated with the agendas. Read the minutes, and you'll see what they do. It's really not at any of the levels rocket science. The second thing is to talk to somebody who is an elected official. Ask them to reflect on what a governing body does or doesn't do. The time commitment. What types of expertise might be needed? Or what are the ways they gather that expertise. What are the current issues? What do they like about being elected? And then what do they not like about being elected? And then the third thing is do your own research. Every level of government has a statewide association. So there's the Pennsylvania School Boards Association. There's the Pennsylvania Association of Borough Councils. The Pennsylvania Association of Townships. I might have that one wrong, but it's not too hard. Pennsylvania Association, whatever. And those websites have plenty of forward-facing information that anybody can acquire on what are their legislative responsibilities. I know before I ever ran the Pennsylvania School Board Association, I learned a lot. I learned there's only a few requirements for running for school board, being a citizen of the Commonwealth or the district that you're in. But I'm going to talk about school boards because they're kind of a unique elected body amongst all elected bodies. We are essentially elected volunteers. We serve without pay. Most of your other township supervisors, borough councils, they get a little stipend. I don't think they can live on it, but they're not elected volunteers. We are elected volunteers. And individuals running for school board can cross-file. Can't do that with borough council or township supervisor. And I think with school boards, just like a few of the judicial, local judicial positions that can do the same, the legislature in allowing that really was reflecting an intent that these positions aren't blatantly political positions. So let's try to keep it that way. Public education also is kind of unique because it's specifically cited in the Pennsylvania Constitution. And the Pennsylvania Constitution says the General Assembly shall provide for the maintenance and support of a thorough and efficient system of public education to serve the needs of the Commonwealth. So public education was always envisioned to be a partnership between a group at the local level and the state. And historically, the state funded 50% of public education costs. But since the mid-1970s, that number has steadily declined. And for as long as I've been on the board, it's been about 30% or a little bit less. Meaning almost 70%. Federal government kicks in a little bit. We're at, I think, 67% is on local property tax, which was never envisioned as the primary way schools would be funded. And even though the state is now funding less than 30% of public education, each year they pass amendments to the school code, adding new mandates or changing other requirements for public schools. And it is under the public school code that school boards operate. One of our responsibilities is making sure we're in compliance with state law, even though the state doesn't provide us necessarily with the resources to do so. So what do school boards do? Well, we set the vision and the mission. And in doing that, we really are responsible for the overall culture of the district. So when you're looking at that mission statement, it might end up being a little similar to surrounding districts, but there's probably also some differences. And that's where a governing body setting the culture of this school district or the next school district over setting their culture. We hire the superintendent. We work with the superintendent to set annual goals for the district, and then we hold the superintendent accountable for achieving those goals. We approve all of the policies that guide the administration in the operation and management of the district, but they operate and manage the district. We set the policy, and they're up on our website, and there's hundreds of them. And then the administration then has to implement them. And then we pass an annual operating budget. and then also oversee the use of reserve funds. And I do want to touch on that a little bit, because that seems to a lot of people to be kind of confusing. But reserve funds for school districts, they're like your family bank account. So at some point when you wanted to set out to buy a house, you did save some money. You put it aside, so you would have it down, you could get the mortgage, get the house. Reserves enable a district when it needs to build a new school, to renovate a school, to have, maybe all the money that you might need to do a small renovation, but also to have the money to be able to, when we go out with bond financing, not have to borrow so much and not have to borrow it at a higher interest rate, which then in the long run saves taxpayers money. Reserve funds are also used out of which districts make one-time types of purchases or periodic, but not every year types of purchases. So our reserve fund, we plan for a 3-year building and grounds maintenance, replacing the roofs, painting the buildings. We don't do that every year, we do it so many years. And having those reserves mean we keep our buildings up. There is nothing worse than a district that spends down or has no reserves and they can't keep their buildings up. Or they're going to the bank to try to borrow money to paint the building. And then the other thing is you have reserves for unanticipated or extraordinary costs. And the biggest example I can give there is the state of Pennsylvania, or the General Assembly and the governor, has not done the best job in how financing public pensions should occur. And so in a difficult economic time, they lowered what school districts were to put in. School districts didn't raise their taxes and keep putting in the money at a higher level. They thought, oh, let's take that break. And what we got in the mid to like 2005, 2006, 2007, all of a sudden, the state of Pennsylvania, oh my goodness, we have this huge unfunded liability because the teachers were getting older and going to retire, and they are entitled to their pension. And so we had, going along, and then pension costs like this, at a rate that was typically higher than most school districts, if they raised their property tax to their full index, would get. And so reserves, thank goodness, we were very planful. We used reserves to get us through that bubble till it's kind of leveled out. But it might be healthcare costs, or we might see some kind of one-time expense of that nature. And that's why school districts have reserves. And what you should be questioning is, what are their long-term plans for those reserves? I will note, those both in our capital expenditures that we budget for a 3-year cycle, as well as long-term, we identify all those uses so that the public can know. But we are responsible for that. And we are responsible for voting on tax increases. And then finally, under the code, there are a whole series of things, some that make sense, approved curriculum, but others that you think, why is the school board doing that? Like annually, we have to approve the list of vehicles that will transport students and the drivers who will do that transportation. That kind of doesn't make sense, like why, the school board. But we do those things, textbooks, school calendars, monthly expenditures, third-party contracts, and a whole host of other matters that state law requires. So when people ask me, when people say, I'm thinking of running for school board, I usually say to them, there's reasons to run and there's reasons not to run. And I'll start with the reasons not to run. If you just want to vote no on property taxes, you can vote no. You can spend down the reserves. But in the state of Pennsylvania, the state legislature only allows school districts to raise money through property taxes. And after you've spent down the reserves, then you only can really be cutting personnel. And that will mostly be teachers in classrooms, because that's about 75% of a school district's budget, maybe 75 to 80 at times. It's people, the aides, the teachers, the nurses, the guidance counselors. And so if you're not if you're not raising taxes, at some point, well, either you'll have lost all your teachers because they'll go work someplace else if you're not giving them raises, or you'll get to that point. In 1992, the Carlisle area school district had gone through a period of not raising property taxes, not really having reserves, and they really were looking at deficit spending and had to reduce by 20 one year, 20 the next year, and it took them decades, not one decade, but multiple decades to dig out of that hole. That's how quickly, if you just want to vote no on property taxes, it can happen. Shouldn't run if you dislike public education. If you believe that kids should be either homeschooled, all kids, homeschooled, cyber or charter, or private school, all appropriate educational settings, all very important for parents to have choice. But 90% or greater of all children are educated in public schools. And so you can want to get rid of public schools, but they are not places for all the children. We're the place where the vast majority of children in this state, in this country, receive their education. Shouldn't run if you have a particular issue. You're mad at a principal, you're mad about your kid's coach, you're mad that this school did this and that school did that. That's not a reason to run, because the board that's not really their responsibility. And finally, I always say another reason not to run is you think that the district is broken, or that public education is broken, and that you can fix it. You alone can fix it. So you will change all the curriculums, or you will try to bring prayer back into school, or fire all the librarians. No. The district's public education is not broken. They're incredible teachers doing the best that they could do every day. They need leadership and support. And I would say, don't run. The reasons to run. Number one, you value and believe in public education and you respect teachers for what they do. Number two, you do recognize that you have a fiduciary responsibility to every child living in the district, and that has to be balanced with your fiduciary responsibility to taxpayers now and into the future. And that's probably the toughest job of a school board. Number three is that you understand the role of governance, and you know that that's different than managing. Superintendent is like a CEO of the company. We're like the board. We are the board. We set those parameters. We hold them accountable. We shape the vision and mission. But then we let the administrators and the teachers and the counselors and the nurses, the cafeteria workers, bus drivers do their jobs. And finally, running for school board is you understand public accountability, because everything that we vote on has to be in the public, and that our deliberations are in the public, our votes are in the public. And believe me, everything that we do is up on our web. Is it always the easiest thing to find? Maybe not, but it's all up there. All of our curriculums, all of our budgets, all of our expenditures, all of our contracts, all of our reserve fund budgets, all of that all our policies, all our special needs information. It is all up there. So I do want to touch on how to advocate with the school district. And I would just say that I spent 34 years advocating on behalf of the hospitals in Pennsylvania. And so I kind of bring that knowledge to this guidance. Well, first and foremost is taking the opportunity to engage with the district as one's schedule permits. And this, parents, grandparents, can be PTO activities, volunteering at a school. But for members of the community, you can engage with the district administration to serve on task forces or committees or advisory groups. For example, we have a career and technical education program that has a whole occupational advisory committee, and more than 100 individuals from this community serve on those advisory committees. We recently established a guidance council advisory group, and about 40 some members of our community, parents, but other professionals, some from the foster care system, the court system, other areas serve on that group. In addition, there are periodic survey opportunities that the district uses. Now, typically these are with parents or guardians, but other times we've surveyed or engaged community members. We did so during the search for our superintendent. We did both forums or focus groups as well as surveys. And then every student, parent or guardian, employee of the district, citizen living in the district, and every property owner, which would include businesses, may make public comments to the board in written form, letter or email, or in person at our monthly board meetings. And these comments can be on actions that are going to be before the board or any district topic. So, for example, this past year, or actually maybe about a year and a half ago, when we were approving turf field at the high school complex, we heard both through emails and in person from supporters and opponents. A more general type of district topic is, I'll give an example, is, for instance, we had a young man about a year ago come to the board and suggest that the school relook at high school grades and how we are so different from other districts across the country and how we established the letter grades, how we translated numerical score to a letter grade. The student had done careful research. That's why I knew we were so different. He talked to his peers and teachers, so he gathered insights. And he provided all of that to the district in a very respectful request. I have to tell you that we are looking at how we establish the letter grades at the high school. And that individual and their approach, I think we might have gotten there anyways, but certainly he had done a good job in presenting and advocating. I also want to note that every communication from the superintendent to parents and families by video or email are all posted on our district's website. And therefore anyone in the community can see what's going on in the district, what is the superintendent telling parents and families on a variety of issues. The district administration in doing so welcomes parents or community members reaching back and engaging with them. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing a flexible instruction day as opposed to a snow day? Hot topics amongst families. There are also times when district leadership presents at chamber events, Rotary, Kiwanis, United Way, and so many other groups where they do a kind of state of education, just depending on the time of the year. But I know, having attended a number of those with the superintendent, comments and questions and input from community members, always welcome. Always matters. And then I would say, there's always that informal opportunity. At most school events, there's one or more administrators. At a lot of school events, there's one or more board members. We go to community events. We go to the grocery store. There's just about no place that I am that a person couldn't walk up and say, why are you doing this? Or why aren't you doing this? And that we can't have a conversation. And all my fellow board members the same way. Because I do want to spend, tips on working with elected officials. And again, this comes from my 34 years. First, when you're coming at us, even at the local level, what's your ask? It's easy for all of us to say, I don't like this. Okay, now what am I supposed to do with that? So, what are you asking for? Is there a solution that another district has used? Remember, we're people too. We're not machines. We're not walking encyclopedias. And so approach us as people. When a person comes with facts and analysis, is so much more helpful in our thinking. It's also useful to use stories. Anytime you're going to talk to your rep, anytime you're coming to talk to me, using your story, your family, your experience, or your community experience always kind of creates that relevancy. Now, even though you should come with your ask or proposed solution, it's okay if you don't have the complete answers. Understand that we have to research, the legality, things people want us to do that are not allowed by code, and we have to follow that. And then follow up. If we're talking and you say, well, I'll provide you with more information, do it. And the other thing is, if you see that there's been an impact, a change, thank the elected official. Thank you for changing our trash policy or something, whatever, that you asked them to do. But, before I close on talking a little bit about the challenges facing school districts, I'm always mindful with civic engagement, what Margaret Mead said, and really this was in my head a lot when I made the decision to run for school board, is never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And so the civic engagement at whatever level is invaluable. So I want to close on challenges for school districts. And I have to say, when I was thinking about this, the vast majority of challenges that Carlisle faces are what every other school district in this state is facing. First and foremost is the pressure of continual underfunding by the state. I mean, it isn't just that they're only funding 30%, but they stopped funding approved construction and renovation. So local school districts used to be able to get 1% reimbursed by the state. Now local school districts have to fund all of their construction. State has many years flat-lined the funding for special education at a time when we know the number of children needing special services increases. They rarely, for career and technology programs, have given the kinds of funding increases to really keep those programs current, because you have to have, if you're teaching automotive technology, you got to have the latest diagnosis tools and all of that. This is why community partnerships are very important to us, because we get a lot of donations. Our 3D printer was donated. Cars are donated by the Carlisle Auto Flea Market. And so, absent those, I don't know at times, because the state is an unreliable funding partner. Second thing is the declining number of college graduates seeking to pursue careers in education. Now, we are not the only field. The fact of the matter is, baby boomers have mostly retired, and behind them were less populations. But so the boomlet, which would really be, I think my son's generation, was the generation of the baby boomers' kids, which is not as big as the baby boomer generation, but a little bit bigger. They're not choosing education because they feel they can do better elsewhere. They'll feel they'll be more respected elsewhere. And the problem is you can't have a classroom without an educator. And with all due respect to states who think that maybe if you serve in the military for just a little bit, or have an associate's degree, that is not an educated teacher. There is a lot that teachers learn, let alone when they finally have the opportunity to really do their student teaching. And volunteering in a classroom right now where there is a student teacher, that is a lot of work for the classroom teacher. And, you know, so that's an issue. The growing percentage in this state of children living in poverty and what that means for education. The need for continuous revisiting and upgrading of school safety and security. And I just have to say again, I volunteer in elementary school. I have been a participant in active shooter drills. And I have to tell you that I think it is inhumane what we're doing to kids. And those active shooter drills are mandated by state law. The growing number of children and teens with mental health concerns. You know, you're not going to learn if there's a lot going on in your life or troubling you. And so whatever is going on outside of the school comes into the school. And we can't just say park it at the door because you got to do your spelling words. It comes in and it has to be addressed. And all school districts are still grappling with and will be for a couple of more years in addressing the slower academic achievement than would have been anticipated for our students during the pandemic years. It's estimated to be a 3 to a 5 year that it will take to recoup those losses. But a specific issue for Carlisle, which I think merits a lot of civic engagement, is we are looking at our elementary schools. And the district is entitled at Reimagining Our Elementary Schools. Anybody living on the north end of Carlisle or out in North Middleton knows there are tremendous housing growth. 34, Route 74, you can go out and oh my goodness, those houses are going up so fast. In the borough itself, in the northern end, there are multi-housing units in what used to be Maslin Carpets and Carlisle Tire and Rubber. Now all those houses and units don't come with children, but a lot of them do. And so we have schools that are now at 100% capacity. We also have 3 elementary schools on the southern side of the district that are old, and I mean old, and that's Letort and Mount Holly. They are the 2 oldest elementary schools. Moreland, where we redid the front for security purposes, but the rest of the school dates back to 1950s. And so they're in need of long-term renovations, just like a house. You know, you can patch the roof, you can bring in a plumber, but eventually you're upgrading your HVAC, you're upgrading your plumbing, a whole host of other aspects of schools. And so I will say that the superintendent has done a series of videos talking about the needs and the goals of the elementary schools, and they're up on our website. Basically the presentation that was made at a board committee meeting, she broke it up into smaller videos so that people could just watch for about 5 minutes as opposed to the half hour or so. And at some point this spring, we'll probably be announcing that there will be public meetings at which families, taxpayers, teachers, of course, and other staff can be weighing in on, you know, what they see are the critical issues as we look at our elementary schools, what are the priorities, Likely that several options will be outlined to get people's reaction. I will say we are also challenged by this in that the geography of our district is like nobody else's. We have Carlisle in the middle with, North Middleton touching it. And then you go to another part of Carlisle in Dickinson Township, barely touching. And then we have Mount Holly Springs, totally surrounded by South Middleton. And so we don't have, like, a lot of school districts are more like a big square or an oval or a rectangle. We're sort of, and that creates challenges. But I think if everybody avails themselves the opportunity to learn more about our elementary schools, they also will have the opportunity to weigh in. And so I'll just close by saying that engaging in local government, whether it's doing something with us or advocating with us or townships or boroughs or being elected, is extremely rewarding. For me, when I see our students excel and succeed, and particularly when I'm at graduation and I hear our students speak about their educational experience, all the long hours, all the workshops I have to go to so I understand the issues, the detail, the law, the required professional development, because we now are by state law required to have continuing education, and all of the materials and documents that I have to read every month, they're all worth it. Because in the end, we govern to enable 5,200 students to have the best opportunity to succeed in life. And ultimately, I say to people, if you want to be on the board, you have to have room in your heart and in your head, your thinking, for all of them. Every single unique student. Thank you. Anybody's written down?
Okay, why does the high school keep multiple principals? 4 grade level principals and a head principal.
Correct. So each grade has about 4,000, give or take. It can be as high as 400. It can be as high as 450, some years maybe as low as 375. That's about how many students an individual can know by name. And there is that aspect of knowing your students. Number 2, principals are the ones conducting teacher evaluations. And you have to do that by being in their classroom. Not just for 5 minutes, but you have to really see a lesson plan, understand the learning objectives, be able to see how that lesson plan is carried out, and you have to do that more than once. 3rd, every child with an individualized education program, this would be about 14 to 15% of any grade of the students have these. Those meetings require the presence of a principal. But last but not least, the principal is sort of like the CEO of that, or the department chair of that building. So the cafeteria, the janitors, the maintenance, the school nurse, the guidance counselors, all of the individuals that work in that building, really it's that principal guiding that ship, or for that grade. And so if you look at a reasonable span of control, if all people think is that a principal does student discipline, because they do that as well, then yeah, it may seem. But they're the ones guiding that grade. And if you ever get to go to graduation, the principal that is in charge of the 12th grade, you will see how kids come down off the stage and sometimes high five or hug. And then later with the principal, you'll hear the story of what it took to get that kid to senior year and across the stage. principals' jobs are almost 24/7. You know, in our school district, over the last few weeks, we unfortunately had 2 deaths of students, one at an elementary level, one at the high school level. And that's supporting an entire community that is grieving. I could go on and on. If we got rid of some principals, I do not think we would have the positive culture at the high school that we have. We, knock on wood, have a pretty safe environment, and they're really responsible for that. So I think it's understanding the magnitude of their scope, of what they have to do. It's a lot, it's a lot.
We have another question. This question is, and I believe I have this right, has the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that the method of funding of schools is unconstitutional? I assume they're asking about an appeal of the Commonwealth Court decision.
Yeah, the
which
Supreme
did-
Court hasn't ruled yet. The Commonwealth Court ruled that the state's funding of public education is unconstitutional.
You agree with that?
Do I agree? Yes.
I do too.
I totally. If you have, I read you what's in the Constitution, how you can have that in a state constitution and provide less than 30% of the funding, but all of the mandates, I think is unconstitutional.
These property taxes
The property,
really,
well, the method of funding,
Yeah.
listen, I don't think property taxes should be the basis of funding, but it does require change on that part. But that ruling did not have anything to do with property taxes. It was the funding formulas. I believe it would be the governor's not going to appeal the decision, but I believe the Pennsylvania Senate, which is led by Republicans, will. And the ruling doesn't say how to fix it. So I have to say, in other states where this has been done, it is not easily solved. It can be decades in resolution.
Yeah, well, it took us a while to get into the mess. It'll take us a while to get out of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left now. Thank you so much, Paula. I hope that all of you have enjoyed listening from these two, both a public servant and a public volunteer. Paula quoted Margaret Mead, but also Alexis de Tocqueville in his Democracy in America in the 1830s said that the health of democratic society may be measured by the quality of functions performed by private citizens. So I think we're seeing Margaret Mead is a lot closer to us than de Tocqueville, but I think we're certainly seeing the same sort of ideas. And we hope this has been helpful in understanding democratic processes, the importance of being involved in our democracy and be civically engaged. And sort of the final thing that we want to do, I'm going to ask Mary Beth to do a closing, but Kate's going to hand out, we have for you to take with you as your parting gift, the Democracy 76 checklist. It's a list of things that you can do to become civilly engaged in your community. And all of them have been approved by the Founding Fathers. So some of this was originally prepared by the Brookings Institute. I took the liberty of adapting a few things to specific to our area. But hopefully this will be something that might be interesting for you. And so many of you are already so involved. All the hands that went up with poll workers. Just, go ahead and make copies and give it to other people if they're looking for ideas on what to do. And certainly running for school board is one of them on here.